Welcome to Her Art, Her Heritage, a podcast about women from Newfoundland and Labrador who have shaped the province's culture through their art. In each episode, we will be chatting with a leader in the arts industry. My name is Aurora Hickey. I'm a student journalist here at CNA and an actor. Sitting across from me right now is Mary Walsh. She is an actor, comedian, and author. We're hoping you'll gain a new perspective on the arts world through the eyes of our guests. Mary, thank you so much for coming to chat with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Aurora.
I'm so excited to talk to you. So you have recently published a memoir.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, I wrote a novel that I got published in 2017 called Crying for the Moon. It was a Canadian bestseller, but it didn't win any prizes. It didn't kind of generate any of that. And then I never heard from HarperCollins again. And I sort of had that terrible thing. I did this terrible thing all my life of taking everything really personally, assuming, oh, HarperCollins hates me and they hate the book. It had nothing to do with me, of course. As it turns out, I learned that way too late, I guess I was around 72. I would think that it'd be better to learn that earlier. But anyway, so finally they called me about 2 years ago and they said, we've been talking about you. We're wondering if you'd like to write a book of essays, kind of memoir-ish. And I thought, like a kind of literary Sally Field, oh, they like me, they really like me. And it made my mind go mushy. And I said yes, even though I don't write essays and I did never want to write a memoir. Most of the memoirs that people, we're familiar with, like Rick's and Rick Mercer and Mark Critch and Alan Doyle, they're kind of wholesome. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And mine's kind of tawdry in a way. There's a lot of heavy drinking and family dysfunction and, just all kinds of, abandonment issues and abuse and, oh God, and I didn't really want to write about it all, but then I did. Yeah. And I'm really, really glad I did, because things I thought I was still resentful about, things that I thought I was angry about, things that I thought I would never forgive were just gone. And it was only in the writing about it that I discovered that I'd moved on. And about goddamn time, because I'm about to move on to the other side. But it was a great freeing doing that. It was just wonderful.
That's amazing. So you just mentioned that in your memoir there's things, you talk about times where you were unhappy and things were tougher. So when you were writing your memoir, how was it for you to revisit those things, to write about them?
I found it difficult. Now, I'm not always aware of what I'm feeling. Like for a long time, I only had one feeling, anger, or maybe self-pity, two feelings. And so, when things, so I'm not always knowing how I feel, but I was working with my assistant, who's often more on the ball than I am. And she went, this is hard work what you're doing. I mean, it's emotionally difficult, and of course it was, but at the same time immensely freeing. So worth it in the end. Though I got to say, yeah, it was a hard old slog through it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How did you decide what you were going to add? I know, you have lived such an interesting, I'm fascinated with everything that you've done. So is there anything that you added that you wish you didn't, or something you didn't add that you wish you did?
I was at the CSAs, the Canadian Screen Awards, the other night, and I saw Davenant Doyle, and we were talking, and I remembered that Davenant and I had both gone to Afghanistan when Rick, there was a Newfoundlander who was head of the army, of all the armed services for a while, and Rick Mercer, myself, Davenant Doyle, and a band from Montreal went at Christmas time to Kandahar. And we were on the road to Kabul in a great big convoy, and all of a sudden that we pulled off the road, and there was general hysteria, people saying F, 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 get off the road, get off the road. And they thought that a guy on a bicycle, an Afghani guy on a bicycle with a beard, had turned around and looked right in the face of the first driver in the convoy, and they thought it was a roadside bombing. And myself and Davenant Doyle just very quietly took each other's hand, and I thought, oh, this is how I'm going to die, on the road to Kabul, holding hands with Davenant Doyle. How interesting. And it really was an out-of-body experience. And then when I came home, it took me months to get back in. You can't just travel like that. You can't get out of yourself and just suddenly get back in. Like on the plane coming home, I thought, now I'm on the plane. I'm on the plane with, and when I was sitting watching TV with my son and my husband, I thought, I'm here with Jesse and Dawn. But after a couple of months, I finally got back into myself, and so I regret, in a way, not writing about that time in Kabul. It just reminded me when I saw, and then I guess I could have done one because I also went to, where did I go? Never mind. Let's just skip that.
And you've mentioned before that, so at the peak of this hour has 22 minutes. A lot of people would be like, oh my gosh, your job looks so fun, you look so happy, and you've said before, sometimes you weren't. So what was that like?
Mostly unhappy, because I wanted things. Here's a problem. If you have an addiction problem, one of the things that's very difficult for you to accept is that life is what it is, and there's no reality is reality, and as much as you are against it and you want it to be different, and that's why so many of us use drugs and alcohol to change the reality, our own inner reality, and kicked out constantly against how the world was. So things weren't exactly the way I wanted them to be in this hour is 22 minutes, and so I always was, for many, many years, like up on bus, pissed off about that, even though I had gotten sober years. Well, I actually got sober in the same year that I came up with this hour is 22 minutes, 1992. So I was early sobriety. So, I still had many of the isms, and still do, I suppose, to this day. But I do have Ray Guy, who, as you may or may not know, is a very famous Newfoundland satirist, used to always say, "It is what it is, and it couldn't be no tizzer." And I always love that, because it is what it is, and it couldn't be no tizzer. And I found it very difficult to, I remember Rick Mercer doing a little dance of victory when we got the series, and going, we have a national TV series. And I thought, oh my God, now we have a national TV series. Oh no. So I had a tendency to, I how they say the glass half empty and the glass half full.
Yes.
I always would think, I don't even have a glass. I don't even have an effing glass, But so, I was a little on the sad side. Yeah.
What was it like growing up on Carter's Hill?
Well, it was very odd for me growing up on Carter's Hill, because I lived at number 9 Carter's Hill with my 2 maiden aunts and an uncle, and my parents and my brothers and sisters lived at number 7 Carter's Hill, and so and we if you were going to put ridiculous names on things, I guess Aunt May and Aunt Fee and Uncle Jack would be the kind of lace curtain Irish next door people, and the other people, my parents, would be more the shanty Irish. It was a party house next door, and there was always Black Mariahs and fire things and police cars and noise and parties and teenage pregnancies and unexplained deaths and just chaos, total chaos. And upstairs it was very quiet, the kind of quiet you sometimes see when you look at a Christopher Pratt or an Alex Colville painting, the kind of quiet that says that something awful is just about to happen. And there was nothing awful happened upstairs, though I always felt like a traitor, like I was and lacking in courage, because they were always, and May and Emphy and Uncle Jack, who were lovely people and took such good care of me, were always outraged about what was happening next door, and they were always calling them that crowd next door, and of course you can't give anything to that crowd, and I always went along with them. I was only a child, of course, but at the same time I always knew that I was part of that crowd next door, and of course the crowd next door were fully aware of the fact that the other crowd were looking down on them and didn't take it very kindly. So I was somewhere in between, kind of trapped between the two, and it was a very uncomfortable feeling.
How would you describe yourself growing up as a child? Would you feel more introverted or extroverted, or?
I was definitely extroverted, and then I hit adolescence and found drinking and smoking and general thing, and got very and even more extroverted, I guess. I think I was extroverted because I was always making an effort, because having been, abandoned when I was 8 months old, I really thought that I was worthless, totally worthless. And so I was always making a gigantic, possibly, unnecessarily big effort to be good, to be whatever was called for at the time. You know what I mean? Or whatever I thought.
Yeah.
Nobody was asking anything of me really, but what I thought was
Absolutely.
being called for at the time. Yeah.
In what ways did growing up in Newfoundland, do you believe, shaped your career?
Oh my God, everything. When we were growing up, and when we first went to Toronto, and I went to Toronto to go to Ryerson to do theater, it was really, people would just fall down on the elevator laughing if you said you were from Newfoundland. And there was a whole publishing industry in Quebec just devoted to these terrible little joke books called Newfie jokes about how stupid we were and incapable. Our first show as Codco was called Cod on a Stick, and it was making fun of the way that mainlanders like CBC or the National Film Board, about how they would see us as fairly ignorant, stupid, horny-handed fisher folk who really lived in a different time. And really, I suppose Joey always did say he was dragging us kicking and screaming out of the 19th century and into the 20th. And so, but there were so many things, and we knew it somewhere in our hearts that we had a great culture and a great something. We didn't know what it was, but we were just enamored of this place and the people, but at the same time we were making fun, but mostly we were making fun of the way that we were perceived. And growing up in Newfoundland was just everything. And then I remember doing hatching, and there were a lot of people in Newfoundland who were mad at us for the first episode because they said we were making fun of Newfoundlanders. And I remember thinking, oh, well, I've done everything, blah, 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 and I'm just really mad that they're mad. And then I thought, because I always felt like I was homeless in terms of having a real home, like you're with your parents or you're with, but Newfoundland was always my home. So I had Newfoundland. And then when I realized at that time how important, I suppose I had realized it before, but it never became conscious until that time, that was late, that I realized how very, very important and how much I loved Newfoundland, and how I had that 19th century kind of notion that was very common then. I think, was it Tennyson who wrote, "Breathes there a man with soul so dead, who never to himself has said, 'This is my home, my native land.'" And people felt that way. They felt they're part of that. And it's like a gift we got given.
Absolutely.
It's not like we had anything to do with it.
Yeah.
Like, just to have this extra, it's like people who don't like food. Like, you think, oh my God, what do you do all day? Like, it's like that extra little joy that you get because you have something really good to eat, and you think, this is delicious. And you think about people, I never think about food, I don't like food. It's like, and the same thing with being from some place that you love is such a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where exactly did your career begin, and what's your earliest memory of being in the arts industry here?
Well, where it began was I was totally depressed. I had been going to marry a guy from the base, from Argentia, and I went down to Colorado with him. I was only about 17. I failed? I just about failed at everything by that point. And then I came back. We didn't get married, thank God. It's just everything that seems so bad turns out to be a gift.
Blessing in disguise.
Oh,
hey,
yeah, like dodging a bullet there.
Absolutely.
And anyway, I was depressed, and I was lying on the couch, and I remember Aunt May was very worried about me, and she came, I remember coming in at one point and saying, "Are you all right, honey? Should we call Dr. O'Brien, who was the only psychiatrist?" But you can imagine how you wouldn't even want to say his name out loud. That's how we thought about mental illness at the time. And at that same day, I was watching Coronation Street. That's how long Coronation Street was on, because I was only 17 or 18. And there was an ad from the CBC that they were looking for someone to do a summer replacement. And I've no idea. I'd been on the couch for a month or two. What got me up and at it, but they were only across the street, CBC Radio. Yeah. And so I went across the street. I was so sure I was never going to get the job that I don't even know why I went, and I was so relaxed I got the job. And then did a summer replacement job. I got to say, I did a really bad job at that too. We only got one letter from a guy in Grand Falls who was wondering, a gentleman in Grand Falls, wondering who was the mad giggler on from 10 to 11 every morning. That was our only response. But I was terrible at that. And but somebody heard me, and they were doing a play in the basement, and they asked me to be part of it. And then I got in with a crowd, like Tommy. No, Tommy wasn't in that. who was in that with me? Well, Jane Dingle was there, and Graham Walsh, and people I continued to work with, and I sort of turned into, as Tommy Sexton's dad used to call him, an arts and culture center rat for a year or so. And then we did our first semi-professional tour, the first semi-professional tour by a Newfoundland company with the Newfoundland Traveling Theatre Company, Dudley Cox and David Weiser. We went all over the province, slept on gym floors, did The Wizard of Oz and a kind of English farce called See How They Run or something like that. So that was the beginning, and then I got in with that crowd, and then I wanted to go to I wanted to be a journalist, just like you, because I had done some journalism stuff, with the alternate press and stuff. But my marks were just so bad that I couldn't get into journalism school. So you had to do an audition to get into the theater school. So I did not a bad audition, I guess, and I got in. So yeah.
Wow. So,
and I went on till I was 27, still believing I was going to be a journalist someday. And so that's why the idea of This Hour is 22 Minutes was so good personally for me, because I got to act as a journalist on TV.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning.
Yeah.
So I want to end off, I guess, by talking about now your future. So we know that you are doing the Raise Your Voices event soon. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, at the Jag, I'm going to be doing a show, part of my show, my one-woman show called A One Night Stand with Mary Walsh. It exists actually on an album, which you can get anywhere that you get albums. And I've got my book, of course, that's out now, and the audiobook just came out on the 26th of May. And I'm going to be appearing with Matt Wright on stage on the 10th of June at the Jag, raising money. Yeah.
That is wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mary, for coming to chat with us today.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have for today. Mary, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us. Next week, we will be chatting with Pam Party. She is an author, editor, and producer, as well as involved in the Raise Your Voices fundraiser. That's all for this week. Bye for now.